Okay, let's try and unpack this. Hearing that federal agents, executing a search warrant, reportedly found AR-15 parts right alongside, like, a Gucci bag with drug residue and dozens of bottles of sexual lubricant. Well, it certainly paints a vivid picture even before we get into the courtroom testimony.
It really does. And that context definitely sets the stage for this deep dive. We're looking at excerpts from the audio recordings of those federal court proceedings, the ones held just last week, May 19th to 22nd, 2025.
Right. And our focus is specifically on the testimonies from various individuals connected to this whole thing.
Exactly. Our goal here is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most significant, the most telling information from these testimonies for you.
Give you a clear understanding of the main allegations and also the defenses being presented without getting totally lost in all the legal jargon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really crucial as we go through this, just to remember, in our legal system, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's fundamental.
All right. Good reminder.
And we should also mention the source material itself noted some content was censored,
Yeah.
probably because of, platform guidelines or something like that.
Okay, so let's get right into the core of it. These allegations about abuse and control. One of the first testimonies we looked at was from Don Later. He talked about witnessing alleged physical abuse against Cassie Ventura.
Yeah, he described specific instances where she was allegedly dragged, kicked, punched. And he noted, interestingly, that these things seemed to happen after Cassie had, spoken up about something.
And what really stands out in his account are the specific details, right?
Definitely. He recalled an alleged punching incident at a Central Park residence in New York, said it resulted in a swollen eye.
Okay.
And then another time, during a car ride back to L.A., she was allegedly slapped right in the mouth.
Wow. And his reason for staying quiet back then.
Well, he basically said if he did that to someone he supposedly loved, what would he do to an employee? Which, really highlights the alleged climate of fear, that potential power imbalance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Building on that, there was also Carrie Morgan. She identified herself as Cassie Ventura's best friend.
Right, and her testimony seemed to add to that picture. She talked about witnessing other alleged incidents of physical abuse.
Like what specifically?
Well, she mentioned an alleged kicking incident in the Hollywood Hills,
Mm,
and she said security ribbon was actually present for that.
security was there.
Yeah, and also an instance in Jamaica allegedly being dragged by her hair. And she mentioned this KTH incident, describing Cassie showing up in a hoodie, hiding her face, and someone, allegedly Sean KZ, just hammering on a door.
Huh. The KTH incident. That sounds distressing.
It does. And Carrie Morgan's testimony, it sort of corroborates the physical abuse claims and adds these, well, frankly, unsettling details. The fact security was reportedly there for the Hollywood Hills thing and apparently didn't step in, that just raises more questions about the power dynamics, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And she also mentioned seeing him hit Cassie with a wooden coat hanger and choking her.
Yes, she testified to witnessing those alleged acts as well.
Okay, so the testimonies also went into Sean KZ's alleged control over Cassie. David James, who was a former personal assistant.
Right. He testified he overheard Sean KZ say something pretty revealing.
What was that?
He quoted him saying, "Kim is my queen out in L.A. with my family." Then he apparently added, "I have Cassie right where I want her. She's young and moldable."
Young and multiple. Wow.
Yeah. And Cassie herself reportedly told David James, quote, "Sean controls my life, my music. He pays for my apartment."
So that testimony from David James gives this, disturbing glimpse into the alleged mindset, the methods of control, maybe?
Exactly. That phrase, young and moldable, it suggests a very deliberate attempt to shape and dominate her life. And you combine that with what Cassie reportedly said about her career, her living situation being financially controlled.
It points strongly towards, well, significant dependence, potential manipulation, maybe.
It does. And then you have the testimony from Cassie's mother, Regina Ventura.
Right. What did she say?
She talked about getting a message from Cassie saying that Sean KZ allegedly threatened to release some kind of tape.
Tape.
Yeah, and threatened to go after both her and a Mr. McCootie and demanded $20,000.
$20,000. So threats and financial demands.
Uh-huh. Regina Ventura also testified about seeing photos of Cassie's alleged bruises. And another incident where Sean KZ allegedly just took Cassie's phone and her car.
Taking her phone and car, that really adds to the picture of alleged control and isolation.
It does. It introduces this element of alleged financial coercion, intimidation, using pressure to maintain control, potentially.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the allegations around drugs and firearms. Don Richard, again, he testified he allegedly saw Sean Casey using various substances.
Yes, he listed quite a few. Weed, ketamine, Molly, cocaine, and even opiates. And he also claimed he saw Sean Casey with handguns.
Okay, so alleged substance use and firearms.
If his account is accurate, yeah. It points to that pattern within Sean Casey's circle, allegedly. And the handguns detail just adds another layer to the overall picture these testimonies are painting.
And David James, the former assistant, his testimony seemed to back some of this up.
It did seem to corroborate parts of it. He claimed he was actually tasked with replenishing drugs for Sean Casey regularly.
Replenishing, like buying them?
Yeah. He specifically mentioned Viagra, ecstasy, and perks. And he even said he allegedly had to use his own credit card for these purchases.
His own card? Seriously?
That's what he claimed. Said he'd get reimbursed by Sean Casey's associates later. He also stated, independently, that he saw Sean Casey with guns at his house, which aligns with what Don Richard said.
Okay, that's something. But maybe the most striking testimony on this front came from Special Agent Gerard Gannon, the one involved in the search of the Star Island property.
Right, his testimony was about the physical evidence they found. It was quite specific.
What did he detail?
Components of AR-15 rifles, loaded magazines where the serial numbers had been, cut off or removed.
Serial numbers removed. That's not legal.
No. Also ammunition and this dark wooden box labeled Puffy.
Puffy?
Yeah. And inside that box, he testified, were 31 bottles of Astroglide and 25 bottles of baby oil.
31 bottles of Astroglide
Right.
and 25 of baby oil.
That's what he stated. And additionally, he testified they found a Gucci bag. Inside that, residue of meth and MDMA, pills with a Tesla imprint.
Like the car company.
Apparently. Also, pills containing Xanax and a $100 bill with cocaine residue on it.
Wow. So Agent Gannon's testimony presents, concrete physical items collected from the property.
Exactly. The AR-15 parts with those obliterated serial numbers of various controlled substances, the paraphernalia.
Yeah.
Those are significant findings. They relate directly to the allegations of drug use and illegal firearms.
And that sheer volume of lubricants in the Puffy box, that detail really stands out, doesn't it? Especially thinking about some of the other testimonies.
It does. It's a very specific and notable detail in the context of everything else alleged.
Speaking of which, the testimonies also included some, pretty unusual accounts about attempts to facilitate sexual encounters.
Yeah, this part was quite different. There was testimony from a Mr. Sherrier Hayes. He identified himself as a male exotic dancer.
An exotic dancer, okay. And what did he testify about?
He said he was hired multiple times. His job, he said, was to create, and these are his words, sexy erotic scenes for Sean Casey and Cassie Ventura.
Sexy erotic scenes. What did that involve?
Well, his descriptions were quite detailed. He mentioned baby oil, dim lighting, and he said Cassie specifically instructed him not to acknowledge her husband during these encounters.
Not acknowledge him, even though he was presumably there.
Apparently.
Yeah.
And then, according to Hayes, Sean Casey would appear naked, but with his face covered, holding a bottle of Astroglide.
Naked, face covered, holding Astroglide. That's kind of bizarre.
It is a very peculiar picture of their alleged relationship dynamics, yes.
And how often did he say this happened?
He claimed it was between 8 and 12 times. His payment apparently started at $800, but went up later to $2,000 or sometimes $1,200.
And there was something about whether Cassie enjoyed it.
Right. His opinion on whether Cassie seemed to be enjoying these scenes was actually objected to in court. They didn't let him answer that.
Ah, okay, so the defense objected. That's significant.
It is. It really underscores that these encounters are contested and how difficult it is to interpret someone's subjective experience, especially in circumstances that sound so unusual. The changing payment also raises some questions, about the nature of these alleged arrangements.
It makes sense. Now, naturally, the defense didn't just let these testimonies stand. They went after the credibility of several witnesses, right?
Oh, absolutely. Standard practice. During the cross-examination of Don Richard, for instance, they really honed in on alleged inconsistencies between his various statements.
Like what?
Specifically, they brought up a people go missing statement he'd apparently made previously and something called the egg incident. They tried to show contradictions.
Okay, trying to poke holes in his story.
Exactly. And they also questioned his motives. They pointed out that he'd actually reached out to Sean Casey looking for work after these alleged incidents, despite claiming he was afraid.
Ah, so why ask for work if you're scared? That's the implication.
Precisely. And they also mentioned that his solo music career hadn't quite reached the same level of success as his earlier group work, maybe implying a financial motive for testifying or getting involved.
Got it. And Carrie Morgan, Cassie's friend, she faced tough cross-examination too.
She did. The defense really emphasized that she hadn't had contact with Cassie for a long time, reportedly since 2018.
So questioning how much she really knows about recent events.
That seemed to be the angle.
Hmm.
And they also brought up a settlement she had with McCarrick the Ventura. The defense pointed out that the money for that settlement allegedly came from Sean Casey.
Okay, so suggesting a potential financial bias, or that her memory might be fuzzy.
Right. Trying to plant seeds of doubt about her reliability and objectivity because of that time gap and the financial connection, however indirect.
Then David James, the assistant.
Similar tactic. His initial statements to the government were put under the microscope during cross-examination. The defense highlighted alleged contradictions with what he testified later in court.
So inconsistencies between early statements and court testimony.
Yeah, any significant discrepancies, they're always prime targets for defense attorneys. It lets them argue the witness is unreliable or maybe change their story or isn't being fully truthful.
And Mr. Hayes, the dancer, what about his cross-examination?
They questioned him about his book, which apparently has the title, In Search of Freezer Meat.
In Search of Freezer Meat. Oh.
Yeah. They asked about that, his professional background, and also whether he developed any, personal feelings for Cassie Ventura.
Suggesting maybe his perception was colored, or he had some other motive.
That seemed to be the implication, that maybe his feelings or his book or his profession might have influenced how he remembered or described things, trying to explore potential biases.
Okay. Now, there was also expert testimony, right, from a psychologist.
Yes. Dr. Don Hughes. He's a clinical and forensic psychologist. He testified about why victims might stay in abusive relationships, which can often seem confusing from the outside.
What kind of reasons did he give?
He talked about a lot of complex factors. Psychological bonds, just plain fear, intimidation, shame, financial dependence. He mentioned love bombing, this cycle of affection and abuse.
Right.
Also the fact that victims often make multiple attempts to leave before they finally can. He talked about trauma bonds, placating behavior, trying to keep the abuser calm, minimizing the abuse, and just the overall power dynamics involved.
That provides important context, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He also mentioned the specific kind of language victims often use and how crucial a safe environment is for them to even feel able to speak openly about what happened. His expertise really helps explain behaviors that might otherwise seem illogical.
But the defense cross-examined him too.
They did. They focused on the fact that his main professional experience is with victims of abuse, not necessarily with alleged perpetrators.
Okay, questioning if his expertise directly applies to understanding the accused alleged actions.
That seemed to be part of it. And they also questioned how involved he was directly with this case, noting he'd prepared for his testimony by working with the prosecution, trying to suggest a potential bias there.
Right. Okay, then there were several former staff members who testified, offering insights into the environment around Sean Casey, George Kaplan, a former executive assistant.
Yeah, he detailed his duties, said they included witnessing Sean Casey's temper firsthand. He alleged threats to his job and even saw him throw green apples at someone named Gina.
Throwing apples.
Green apples, specifically. He also testified he was told to set up hotel rooms with Astroglide and baby oil.
So that connects back to the items found in the search and what Agent Gannon said.
Potentially, yeah. Kaplan also mentioned cleaning up what looked like drug residue and personally picking up drugs and cash for Sean Casey.
So direct involvement in some of the alleged activities.
That's what he testified to. He also gave his reasons for leaving Kimmons Enterprises, said he was uncomfortable covering things up, plus his father was ill. And he added observations about Sean Casey's relationships with Cassie, Kim, Gina, and an alleged incident on a private jet where Cassie apparently got bruised.
A lot packed into his testimony. Then there was Scott M. Scotty, an actor and musician.
Right. He had dated Cassie. She testified that she came to his home seeking refuge once, saying she was really distressed after some kind of confrontation with Sean Casey.
Seeking refuge. And then didn't something happen to his car?
Yes. That was a major part of his testimony. He said his car was set on fire later, allegedly with a Molotov cocktail.
Whoa.
And he testified that he later met with Sean Casey about it at the Soho House, and Sean Casey denied having anything to do with the fire.
Okay, so a serious allegation of retaliation there. How did the defense respond?
They cross-examined him, focusing on the timeline of everything, the exact nature of his relationship with Cassie, maybe suggesting bias, and also questioned the DNA evidence, or lack thereof, from the car fire investigation.
Trying to pick apart his story and the evidence.
Got it. And Mila Morales, a makeup artist.
Yes, a celebrity makeup artist. She testified about working with Cassie and seeing injuries on her.
Injuries. When was this?
She specified it was during Grammy weekend back in 2010. Said Cassie had a swollen eye, knots on her head, allegedly after an altercation with Sean KZ.
So, another account alleging physical harm.
Right. Morales spoke about being scared for her own life at the time, but providing emotional support to Cassie. She also mentioned there were photos and interviews related to these events.
Photos could be significant.
They could be, yes. Her testimony adds another layer, corroborating alleged physical harm at a specific point in time.
Okay, we also heard from someone from a hotel.
Yeah, Frederick Zur, he's the general manager of the Hermitage Hotel in LA. His testimony was more about sort of logistics and patterns.
Like reservation details.
Exactly. He talked about Sean KZ's reservation profile at the hotel. It was created way back in 2006, apparently used various names including Jackie Star.
Jackie Star, an alias. And Zur recalled specific room requests, like taking the room out of service for longer cleaning periods, setting the thermostat really high. And he remembered a complaint about candle wax on the carpet once.
Interesting details. Maybe less dramatic, but they could potentially connect to other things.
Possibly. They provide details about alleged habits and preferences during hotel stays, the aliases, the specific room requests. Maybe they align with what George Kaplan said about setting up rooms, for example. It adds to the overall context.
And finally, there was testimony about digital forensics from Homeland Security.
Right. Special Agent Josh Croft.
Yeah.
He testified about extracting data from one of Cassie Ventura's MacBook Pros.
What did he find, or what did he explain?
He explained the technical stuff, like what a factory reset does and this concept of unallocated space.
Unallocated space.
Yeah, basically, it's like the empty areas on a hard drive where data that's been deleted might actually still hang around for a while. It's not necessarily gone forever immediately.
Okay. So a factory reset might not wipe everything clean?
Potentially not, depending on what happens afterwards. He also talked about backup methods used, like iTunes and iCloud. And he mentioned one interesting find, a user profile named Frank Black on one of the laptops they examined.
Frank Black. Another name.
Yeah, just another detail thrown into the mix from the technical side. Could be relevant, could be nothing.
So, wow. We've really covered a lot of ground here, navigated through a significant amount of testimony. Allegations from abuse and control to drugs, firearms, those really unusual sexual encounter descriptions.
And then balanced against that, the challenges to witness credibility, the expert psychological context, and all those observations from former staff and other related parties like the hotel manager and the forensics agent.
Yeah, it's a lot. What's really compelling, I think, is how all these different pieces of testimony, even the contradictory parts, start to form this more complete, though obviously very complex and highly contested picture.
Exactly. A picture of the alleged dynamics, the environment surrounding Sean KZ and Cassie Ventura, and even, the defense's attempts to discredit witnesses. Those tell you something, too. They show where the prosecution's case might be seen as vulnerable.
It really does. And after hearing all these different accounts and the alleged inconsistencies the defense flagged, plus just the sheer volume of all these details, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the nature of truth in situations like this? Like, how do you even begin to weigh all these different perspectives, all these memories and allegations to try and figure out what might have actually happened?
It's a huge question. This whole deep dive into the testimonies, it just raises these profound questions about power, about control, the incredible complexity of human relationships.
Yeah.
It really forces you to think about how individual perceptions, maybe potential biases, just the passage of time, how all that can shape someone's personal story, and then how those stories get presented and torn apart within the legal system.
Absolutely. It is definitely a lot to process. Thanks for digging into all of this with us.